Hello and welcome to On Cinema at the Kitsta YouTube channel. Today we are taking a look at my top 15 movies of 2024. I saw a good amount of movies this year. I saw 33 2024 releases, so this is roughly the top half, um, which I think is a pretty solid number, but I think I complained about this last year too. It's like the rate at which you see new movies is always going to create an even faster rate at which you become aware of movies you'd like to see. Like the simplest example is you go to the theater to see a movie, and then you see like five trailers for other movies. So your pool of movies you might be interested in decreases by one, but then also increases by five. And of course, it's like not actually that simple in practice. Probably most of those trailers sucked. But it's frustrating, you know. You just always become more and more aware of the tiny, tiny selection that you'll actually be able to see. And that selection feels tinier and tinier in comparison as you become aware of the wide world of cinema. But, you know, it is what it is. You just gotta accept that. And the important thing is seeing good movies. And I saw some great, great movies this year. Uh, Frankly, you know, well past these 15 were movies I really enjoyed and would have loved to talk about in a video like this. But I had to cut it off somewhere. I couldn't, you know, make an 8 hour long video talking about absolutely everything. So follow me on Letterboxd. The account there is also Kitsta. You can read reviews of everything I saw this year. Gonna keep doing that going forward. It's a lot of fun. And this is just, yeah, like 15 that I was especially excited to talk about, that I especially enjoyed, for all sorts of reasons that we will get into over the next hour or so. We're gonna start off by talking about this movie here. Looks ominous, doesn't it? What kind of perspective does the camera have in this kind of unsettling situation? This is Steven Soderbergh's The Presence. POV, you are a ghost witnessing family drama and other intrigue. And I really do mean POV here. I've noticed the mimetic usage of POV has become totally nonsensical in the last few years, where basically POV just signifies that you are about to describe what happens in a video. But no, this is a movie that is actually entirely shot first person from the perspective of a ghost, as it inhabits this house where a new family has just moved into. You are totally disembodied, you are totally voiceless. All you can do is observe with very minimal poltergeisty type actions, rattling drawers, causing something to fall off a shelf. And you are kind of trapped in this perspective, witnessing the lives of a family of four as they each struggle through their own issues. Putting aside the supernatural element, I love this simply as a family but something bad happens movie, one of the all-time genre greats. The characters, I think, are very nicely set up in kind of a sweet spot between archetypally recognizable, you know. You've got the dad who just seems overwhelmed and exasperated by everything else going on, is seemingly a genuinely good dude who's trying to really ground himself and connect and figure out what he needs to do to support his family when they're almost at odds with one another. The mom, very conniving. It's implied that she's involved in some sort of shady business that she might actually end up in legal trouble for. She worships her son. She sees her son as kind of an avenue to a coolness she maybe never had or feels like she's lost. She's very much clinging to that sense of relevancy through this kind of unhinged love and support towards her son, who is kind of an up-and-coming young athlete in high school. He wants to be cool. He knows he could be seen as cool because of his prowess. He wants to make friends in this new space. But he's quite inherently dorky. And they bring it, like, that comes through more in the performance. That comes through more in just, like, the way he speaks and the way he acts. and it just sort of is like the puzzle piece that connects the whole character together, that he's not actually cool and he's very insecure about being seen as cool, and he knows he has an opportunity to sort of like reinvent how he's perceived. But you can see like this dorky energy that has just not totally faded away from him. Again, never really like explicitly called out, but just something that once you realize it about the character, it's like everything else makes more sense. And then the daughter, who's sort of the main character, um, who just lost her friend, who's the only one that at the start senses the presence of the ghost and thinks that it may be her friend from beyond the grave. She's really struggling with this loss. She's dissociating. She's having a horrible time kind of connecting with her family. But she's still craving some sense that someone understands her, some sense that someone can understand what she's going through. And this is just kind of what's presented to us. And as I said, they're all kind of archetypal, so we glean them quite readily. But they're really authentic too. They feel so deep in authenticity of sort of like cascading consequential relationships where it truly feels like these children would have been raised by these parents. You know, like it makes sense that all of them being the way they are and interacting in this sort of pressure cooker that is the nuclear family, that all of these complexes would emerge, that all of these cravings would emerge, that all of these dysfunctional things would emerge. I think that's like a real talent in writing family as characters, is making it that they truly feel like they've spent this much time together, you know, like everybody rubs off on each other in one way or another. Oh my gosh. I always get horrible gas at the start of these videos because I haven't been like talking for a while and I've probably been snacking, and then suddenly my respiratory system has to suddenly engage in speaking, and it's like the burps start getting generated. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just very impressed anytime a movie can pull that off for me. That it doesn't just feel like four isolated characters, but a system of relationships that really has persisted and grown ever since the kids were born for years and years. They're all moving through pretty substantial arcs in their life. It's an eventful time. The loss of the daughter's friend, the new house, this strange business deals going on, the dad finally hitting kind of his breaking point with this dysfunction, and all moving into a new house together. It feels like a real vertical slice through kind of everything happening in their lives that we just get to witness over the course of a couple weeks of dread, of pain, and mostly of change. But returning to the supernatural, I find there's a real surprising depth in what seems at first to be kind of a gimmick. At the start, you know, it's a little unsettling, but intriguing, this ghostly POV. It just kind of gives you another angle to assess the movie as you're trying to figure out these character dynamics and what's going on with this family. You're wondering, okay, well, what is the ghost's interest? What is its ultimate goals? Why is it observing this family, and why is it observing specific scenes? You know, the way the movie is edited, there's a lot of very long takes where the ghost just sort of wanders through the house. Why does it kind of check in on particular family members? And then sort of seeing the collection of scenes that we see as a selection from, you know, the weeks and weeks of what the ghost was seeing, there seems to also be some sort of intent that it's like crafting a narrative. Of course, actually, it's Steven Soderbergh crafting the narrative, but we ascribe that to this ghost POV character, and that kind of creates this other layer of mystery of what is the story we are being told and why. Slowly you begin to identify with the ghost, and you relate to it on like a really fundamental level of cinema, which is this lack of agency, that both the viewer and the ghost POV character are both just faint witnesses to what's going on. It enhances and highlights, yeah, this real component, this core unspoken truth of film watching, is that it is inherently a helpless activity, that no matter how much empathy you have for the characters on screen, no matter how passionate you feel about how things should happen one way or the other, there is nothing you can do about it. You are simply helplessly watching the events play out. And then this feeling of helplessness is wielded to entrap you in what I found by far the most tense and uncomfortable moment of my cinematic year, of maybe just my year in general. In the climax of the film, I won't spoil anything. It escalates in such an amazing way. And never before have I felt such an acute sense of helplessness, almost screaming out at the movie for something to happen. And my boyfriend can attest how hard that was, like, gripping onto him during that entire sequence. Yeah, really masterful stuff. Soderbergh seems to be able to just make any type of movie he wants and have it be good. Very curious to see what's next. All right, next on our list is this another unsettling shot for many, many different ways. This is Dead Talent Society. An inherently funny concept and setting is the foundation of this one, where we view a world through the eyes of a newly dead person. And this is a world where the dead can persist as ghosts. They still have all of their personality and their appearance and the full agency of a human being, but they can only remain as ghosts wandering the earth as long as they can keep scaring people. That's what triggers them to be recalled in people's memories, and as long as people keep getting scared and remember those frights, the ghosts still can be, like, substantial. They can still substantiate themselves upon the earth. So that's kind of like the lore reason. And then the consequence of this is that there's, like, basically a ghost entertainment industry that is really just a note-by-note parody of Hollywood. The scariest ghosts have become celebrities in this world for their innovative and powerful and consistent across decades or centuries methods of scaring. So this is like a opportunity for, of course, playful reimaginings of Hollywood archetypes. You have the struggling new artist, our main character, mentored by the past her prime throwback star, who has a bitter rivalry with the meteorically rising new genius that used to be her student, but now has raced past her in the Ghost popularity rankings and now is winning all the Ghost Academy Awards. And at the same time, these are paralleled with horror archetypes. There's homages in all sorts of horror media, going from folktales of yokai and other such creatures, to horror flicks all through the ages, from kind of classic Hollywood horror to new Japanese horror of the early 2000s. And then, like, creepypasta, internet-born horror, YouTubers that relay scary urban legends and everything. Everything is represented in this world's version of it, where the kind of star spooker isn't just, a abstract figure that exists in sort of like a mythological space, but is just a human being ghost that hobnobs and toasts at after spooking parties and attends ghost award shows and goes, yeah, the appearing in a tunnel gimmick, I was the first one to think of that. It's just lovely. It's so much fun. It's not just a funny concept, it's super intriguing too. Like, I really wish we could explore this world more. I wish it was a manga. I wish it was a manga that ran for many years and had many arcs where all of these different parodies could be explored and all the different kind of questions that the setting makes you ask. Not in terms of like, ooh, is this a plot hole, but questions that you want to ask because you want to see the answer. On top of this, they build perhaps my favorite kind of comedic premise archetype. My favorite plot structure to have in a comedy, which is trying to put together some sort of performance. Be that a play, or a movie, or in this case, a big scare. And everything, of course, busts apart at the seams, a true comedy of errors. In this cascading, escalating series of mistakes, of goofs, of miscommunications, of total slapstick disasters, of character motivations clashing, of any number of things, just kind of tearing apart the intent in as many different directions as you can. It's a structure where everything kind of remains relevant at once, because it's like problems that occur during rehearsal are funny in them themselves, but then just sort of set up a later joke where it's like, well, that could always go wrong again. Or, oh, well, remember, we had to do XYZ to prevent such and such a thing from happening. And then you've got a setup that when it comes for the actual performance, oh, hey, whoops, they didn't do XYZ thing. You anticipate that creates such a core comedy moment, With this chaotic storm of payoffs and callbacks. And then, yeah, even in a situation where the problem is quote unquote solved, the character is given a speech that compels them to do some sort of thing. The fact that that thing happening is hinging upon the character, thus again kind of creates this real comedic Rube Goldberg machine, where tantalizingly you can see if one part is removed, that 4 or 5 other things are just going to collapse in on themselves. Everything needs to be re-executed when it comes to actual showtime. And it's just, yeah, that really awesome sense of comedic anticipation, all culminating in the major climactic Showtime event, which is the peak of tension, These characters are really enduring. You want to see it work out for them. You're cheering for them. There's catharsis, and when it kind of pays off. But then a lot of laughter, and because you haven't seen so many disasters coming, and now there's this very funny payoff of everything going wrong in ways both expected and unexpected. This is a movie that nails this just as well as the timeless classic Bowfinger, which was one of my favorite movies as a kid, which was probably the thing that kind of got me into this whole subgenre of comedies about trying to make something. Bowfinger is phenomenal. Everybody go watch Bowfinger. But also watch this when it becomes available. I think it pulls off that sort of energy just as well. And then on top of that, really, really perfectly placed emotional beats. I was so impressed for a movie like this that is clearly made with so much love for the setting and for the characters. It's totally expected that the director will take some time to be like, well, let's really learn about our characters. Enough laughs for now. Let's learn about these characters' trauma that inform who they are. Let's learn about what they were in real life before they were killed and became ghosts. And that's all well and good. But if you do that for like a second too long, and the laughter subsides for a second longer than it should, or if you ever bore the audience in a movie like this and they're going like, come on, let's get back to the fun, that can be the greatest detriment that a good comedy can ever experience. Just slightly, like 1% too much self-serious can totally spoil the whole mood of the piece. And so much credit to the director here. Even though they obviously had so much love for the characters, they did not step over this line even an inch, in my opinion. Making it, really emotionally resonant. I almost teared up at one point. I really did come to love these characters. But I never felt like it overindulged in paying off that love, paying off that connection. Okay. Let's move to number 13. This is not even the latest. One of 3 movies this year by legendary Japanese horror director Kiyoshi Kurosawa. This is maybe the first. Chime, a new film novella and accompanying NFT. Everybody go out and buy Chime Coin by one of the all-time horror / thriller goats. Kiyoshi Kurosawa here re-examines a core theme of Cure, which I think widely is considered his masterpiece. I think it's still the favorite thing I've seen of his. Which is kind of this question of like, what don't we know? What is the impenetrable depth of the behavioral workings of our minds what essentially is happening on that most basic level that can be fucked with? What if lurking deep within it were impulses we can't understand, that we can't even perceive ourselves doing? Moments of total fugue state hypnosis, of total behavioral shifts, automatic actions that are merely awaiting some incomprehensible, some unpredictable, some causally disjoint by any set of logic trigger. And this is kind of the question that Cure really builds up as a mystery. So, in Cure, not to spoil too much, there's all these incidents where people will, for seemingly no reason at all, just calmly, robotically pick up whatever weapon is closest to them, murder someone in their vicinity, carve a big X on their chest, and then kill themselves. And this is the incidents that kind of kickstart the whole film of Cure, and the whole film is about investigating these incidents and investigating the causality. And yeah, it's kind of slowly emerges that it's some sort of like strange automatic behavior is somehow being triggered. In Chime, it's sort of like uh, between the title and between things that happen very, very early on in the movie, and also probably most of the people watching this having already seen Cure, it's like you already kind of jump to this idea of, well, what if these people are somehow being triggered to behave in the ways that they do? And then it kind of opens up the next question, which is like this puzzle of what is maybe triggering them to do it. What is actually this automatic triggered behavior? What is conscious choices that we are witnessing sound of mind people do? How do we distinguish them? What are the bounds of this automatic activity? And what is the subjective experience of what we witness our man doing? Like, what is actually going on in his brain as he does the things he's doing? I don't want to spoil all the stuff he gets up to. It's an amazing, amazing performance. But he really keeps it cryptic, obscured. What is going through his head? And what do we experience alongside him? Like, what leaks out in terms of kind of his subjectivity? What is it that we are seeing in the diegesis? What is it in terms of the framing of the scene, the soundtrack, the grading, all of these sort of stylistic choices that kind of imply some sort of focalization that we are sort of experiencing the world as the main character is, but at the same time kind of leave it open, like what is it that we're missing? What other motivating factors are at play here? Is there some sort of chime that he hears that we can't? Now, I call it a cryptic puzzle because, like a puzzle, like a cryptic crossword perhaps, it gives the impression of everything counting. And I think this is reinforced by the fact that it's so short. It's only about 40 minutes long. And you are, I think, very much encouraged to witness everything as if it was one piece of this big puzzle that kind of explains what's happening. There's so many like small glimpses of mundanity, things that aren't really shocking, that are just sort of slices of life, small moments with his family, small moments in the class that he's teaching. But they're all just kind of like a bit off. The example that stands out most for me is that in their house, there's just like endless piles of aluminum cans. And there's a shot of his wife like exasperatedly dumping all of the cans into recycling bins. And this butts up right against the scene where he's talking to his son, and he's asking his son about this club that he's in at presumably school. And the son's like, yeah, I'm still in the club. And he goes, well, don't overdo it with the club. And then the son just like bursts into laughter. And then the wife goes and throws out the cans. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I think he's in some sort of like recycling club, and he's like gathering up cans. And when the main character says that, he laughs because he's like, oh, you guys didn't see in the kitchen I have like huge bags full of cans. And I was like, ooh, I think I like wove together a little secret plot line out of these mundane scenes. But it's kind of like, that's just like one little thing. And just everyone acts so weird. Like this kid bursting into laughter, it's like a really unsettling, aggressive laughter directed at his parents, who seem both exasperated and a little confused. But like everybody acts weird. The main character especially, but like everyone he meets, everyone he talks to, the scene where he's getting interviewed for a job, everybody's acting weird. People in the background are doing strange things at times. The investigator is kind of acting weird. He's probably the most normal one, but it's still weird. And it's, you kind of wonder, like, are they really that weird, or are we seeing some sort of like subjectivized reality where everything kind of has this sort of hostile alien uh, buffer, this kind of shell, where they appear more bizarre than they are, because this is somehow reflecting the subjective experience of our main character. And then like there's some bizarre, seemingly unrelated instances of sudden violence happening almost in the background in some cases. And you wonder, like, what secret thread links them? Is there something that recurs in each of those scenes? Again, is there some chime that we can't hear? Something that makes these things happen? And of course, our main character can be analyzed in many, many different ways. There's obviously kind of aspirations he has that he seems like he has not yet met, that he regards as disappointments. There's frustrations. But then there's moments where it seems like he's genuinely fulfilled, and there's moments where he seems happy. And there's moments where he certainly has like a lot of agency and seems to self-actualize in some way. And it's like, okay, is there a way that we can kind of add these up to a cohesive character portrait that then points at some of the mysteries of the movie? It just encourages you to think along all these lines, like a conspiracy theorist. I felt like I wanted to start laying out different plot points and linking them with the red string. But in the end, I don't know, having talked about it with my boyfriend and stuff, I think it's more about the feeling, that conspiratorial feeling, the feeling of staring down a puzzle with many pieces that seemingly don't quite fit together, that are missing some pieces, as if this was only a 40-minute excerpt of a longer movie or something. And it's not about there being an answer. Is there an answer? I don't know. But it's the feeling that makes it good. That's what makes it so compelling. I want to know the answer. And I still kind of think there is an answer. Like, I still... It feels like there's... Kurosawa, like, had something in mind. That there is, like, some secret thing that just explains everything we see in the movie. But that's what counts, is the feeling I have. The fact that I'm hungry for that is what makes the movie compelling. Not any particular answer. Not even the capability of finding such an answer. I don't know. It's very, very interesting. What a cool movie. Okay. At 12, we have Man Drinking Coffee in 4-3. This is My Sunshine. Certainly the most gymnopede core movie I have seen since probably the trailer for The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. By that I mean the trailer has Eric Satie's Gymnopede playing in it. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 dun dun dun. And it's like, okay, picture in your mind what kind of movie has a trailer where that's the soundtrack. You're probably pretty accurately picturing this movie. It's a story that feels fraught with fragility from the very first frame. Our main character is a shy boy with a stutter who is forced to play hockey in gym class in Hokkaido. But he is awed and enamored by this girl who is figure skating, and then wants to figure skate himself in order to get closer to her. And also just because I think he thinks figure skating is really cool. The girl is talented and ambitious, but as this boy starts to show an interest and the coach takes an interest in him, the special coach that her mother got for her now must be shared between her and the boy. The coach is actually gay, and this is kind of small town Japan in Hokkaido. And we can guess that's not everybody's cup of tea. And all of these elements and more demand kind of this obnoxious feeling where at the end of all of those lines, even halfway through a lot of those lines, I could go, and what could go wrong? But in waiting for the other shoe to drop, the preciousness of the interim only increases. Like, a lot of these things don't end up being problems. I guess that's sort of spoilers. Oh, I froze? Uh-oh. Hold on. Hold. And I'm still frozen? And we're back? Yeah, we're back. Okay. Yeah, like, spoiler alert, some of this stuff ends up being a problem, but then a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it, the plot kind of just glides smoothly past, as if on skates, and we're given ample time to just enjoy these moments. But we enjoy them as fragile ice sculptures, as snowflakes waiting to melt in our palms. Because we know all of these things, any one of them or more, could go wrong. And that this idyllic lifestyle, this bittersweet feeling of like nostalgic for the present that you get moment to moment in every shot, a really syrupy, thick feeling of this is a good time for them that is likely not going to last forever, is likely not even going to last very long. And yeah, the shoe does drop. It's so sad, but sort of beautiful too, because life goes on. And it's quite tragic, and certainly you're rooting for another outcome. But I think the movie does a really amazing job of just showing that was a wonderful time they spent together regardless of how it ended. That was a time that they'll think back on fondly, probably, no matter how it ends, no matter how things progress. And I think, given up this whole description so far, you might be rolling your eyes, you might be thinking, that's way too precious, that's so twee, way up its own butt. Real, oh, well, isn't life grand sort of thing. But no, I think, yes, if it reveled in its own importance, in, like, the representation aspect of it, oh, so brave, a young man trying to get into figure skating, oh, so brave, a gay man living in a loving relationship, or if it lingered too long on this feeling of goodness, of what sacrifices they make for one another, how that camaraderie is the most important thing of all, blah, blah, blah. If it ever really indulged in one of these messages, if it ever kind of framed a moment of epiphany around that, or kind of rested a climax upon that sort of realization, it could have been very annoying. But everything flows so naturally, and I think this is through really creative directorial decisions where the vast majority of the dialogue was improvised. Character or actors were given just, an understanding of their characters, obviously a very deep understanding of their characters, and just a general sense of where that scene is going to ultimately go. And then they were encouraged to just kind of chat. that I think probably led to a lot of this feeling of lightness and looseness and unpretentiousness. Um, the scenes, I think, likewise, are very understated. Everything is framed in this very naturally beautiful kind of golden, warm, snowy. That's an oxymoron, but just this very beautiful cinematography. I think even the 4:3 framing kind of enhances that. It feels more like a home video than something cinematic. And then this winter brisk pacing where nothing feels too like artistically lingering, I would say. It's all very economical in terms of what it wants to depict and just sort of moving you through the moments of the plot, moving you through all of these characters, all of these establishing scenes. All of it just sort of really has this unpretentiousness that we're not being kind of like challenged to be like, oh, this is so profound, this is so such a grand statement on the human condition or something. No, it really just does feel like a perfectly natural kind of engagement, a natural slice of life in this town and of these characters. It really takes a talent, I think, to capture these moments with such a light hand. And this is a first-time director. I really can't wait for more from this guy. This is going to be fantastic. But yeah, I think it's like if you have the vision to make a movie like this, to make characters like this, to aim for that kind of feeling, and then to still know when to back off the gas, when to not overplay your hand, when to not make it too explicit, not to linger on stuff, not to over dramatize stuff. That's really impressive. Like that shows, I think, a kind of wisdom that typically directors don't get for a very long time. All right, let's move on to number 11. These fine young lads in a basement. This is, of course, Rap World. The big silly project from silly video art man Connor O'Malley and friends. I've been a big Connor O'Malley fan over the last year or so. I got into him kind of sporadically. I'd see a video here or there. And then The Mask came out, which I'd considered even including on this list, but it's only like 20 minutes, so it felt not totally like a feature-length thing. This is the only big, like, long project that he put out. But yeah, The Mask, like, really blew my mind. I thought that was a phenomenal piece of film. Really made me interested in just everything he was going to do after that. It's a hand cam mockumentary about dudes trying and largely failing to record a rap album set in the year 2009. I don't know if I mentioned that. And basically you understand everything. there's kind of not really like a second joke from a very early moment where he's freestyling at his movie theater job and Connor O'Malley calls himself the White Eminem. And it's like, yep, okay, I get what they're going for here. And you're either on board or you're not, but if you're on board, it's a hell of a time. But yet, okay, I say, yeah, you understand the humor, but do you understand the depths, the depravity, the desperation of making this album? You don't. They get distracted. They procrastinate. Petty beef erupts between them. Drama besets them from all sides. They squabble. They have both epiphanies, legit, and just as strong anti-epiphanies, where they conclude something stupid. They get McDonald's, have many copious sessions. They pose with guns and play Wii games. That's our guys. I've rarely felt so seen by a movie. In 2009, I was just starting my first year of my undergraduate degree in university. That was also my last year of high school, which accompanied a lot of partying and stuff, especially that summer. And I don't know, it wasn't like radically different. It was different, but it wasn't like super radically different. A lot of activities overlapped, that's for sure. God, we should have made a rap album back then, man. Oh, I can't imagine. And after all that, and this is the most realistic part of all, I still don't get back in the booth. and start spitting that hot fire that you know is inside them. It's a really, truly unflattering portrait of suburban extended adolescence. Even by Connor's standards, you know, a lot of his other like characters are quite abhorrent, quite abrasive or disgusting or obnoxious. They do some quite awful acts. But I think for a lot of them, there's like a really pitiful factor that's kind of just like their true insanity, that these characters are so far disconnected from reality that you can't really like blame them for any of the poor decisions they're making, and the poor decisions themselves are kind of just so absurd and so beyond kind of relatability that they don't really feel like condemnations. Whereas here, these are like by far kind of his most realistic characters yet, I think, for a major project. And the setting, I think, is far more realistic than a lot of the other things. And so I think these are kind of the least flattering characters that he's portrayed in these videos. Um, these are just like untalented people. They are living very uninteresting dead end lives in suburban, one of those states I don't care to think about. They push forward only via delusion. It would be like really unfathomably cruel and depressing, I think, to make a movie like this if it wasn't so funny. Honestly, I think if you stripped away most of the comedy, like just the sort of like raw comedy of this, and made it much more just the inherent comedy of what losers these guys are, the closest thing I can think of that is Tim Heidecker's The Comedy, which sounds ironic, but The Comedy is actually just like a very bleak and depressing movie, a very mean and cruel movie. But this is funny. This is actually very, very, very funny. But yeah, it's not like American Movie or Local Legends, you know, other movies about amateur creators, of people who are dedicated to producing things even though they don't have the opportunities, be those budget or connections or whatever. People that are, in a certain sense, doomed to quote unquote fail. Although, of course, the success of American Movie and Local Legends on a meta level, it's a whole conversation you can have. But yeah, it's like those people are definitely meant to be endearing. They are meant to like inspire you and see just the inherent value in creation. Or you can kind of look at like the deadbeat, washed up, no future kind of lifestyles and compare it to something like Trailer Park Boys. But Trailer Park Boys, I think, is much, much more flattering. I think there's much more effort in Trailer Park Boys to make the characters endearing and to show that they have good qualities deep down, and that, you know, even though they make many, many poor choices, they're also just sort of victims of society. They're victims of their circumstances. But there's none of that in here. There's no, like, counterpoint or glimpse of, like, uncritical sentimentality. Like, when they express sentimentality, we are meant to laugh at that. They do have, like, some kind of cute or silly qualities that makes us maybe root for them in some small way. But generally speaking, they are just, like, miserably pathetic people that, like, even when we find them endearing, it's in, like, a really pathetic way where they're just so delusional and so hopeless. And yet, through that sheer delusional aspiration, it's the fact that they still want to create something. It becomes endearing, honestly. That in itself, the fact that they're trying to record a rap album, that they have this dream, they have this feeling that they need to get their message out there, that they need to rep their city, their shitty suburban town. That's inspirational. Like that, it truly is. Like, so beautiful is just the idea of artistic creation and expressing yourself in artistic forms, that even here, with only this, with so little scraps of anything likable about them or their situation, they are still rappers. They still are my comrades in the world of creation. All right. Moving right along to number 10. We have a movie of much, much discourse lately. And I honestly think we have not seen anywhere near peak discourse for Anora. Just wait until the big awards start popping. People are going to start tearing each other to shreds over this one. It is an all-screaming, all-banging cavalcade of oligarch money and bad decisions. Rampaging in pleasure. Rampaging in pursuit. Rampaging in regret. And maybe finally, after all that, crashing. Somehow rampaging even throw hungover paperwork in the harsh, cold morning light. This feeling of just this berserk energy permeates the entire movie, I think. Somebody in every scene is so desperately upset or desperately happy or desperately manic or desperately tired. A series of not really disasters in most cases, and in many cases not even like errors. It's very, very different than like a Safdie Bros movie. I had heard a lot of comparisons to Uncut Gems before I saw it, and at first I was a little disappointed after I actually saw it, because it really isn't that much like that Uncut Gems at all. Like the way events relate to each other, kind of the causal structures, is totally, totally different. Because here it's mostly just kind of like natural decisions. It's not, you know, Adam Sandler totally forgot, but he pawned off that ring. And now he's asking, what's his face? Kevin Garnett is asking for it back. It's not like this gigantic, you know, domino crashing down, house of cards crashing down. Instead, it's just sort of like the natural consequences of people making decisions that, yeah, some of them are short-sighted, some of them are kind of stupid, some of them are selfish, and some of them are just pretty smart, good options given everything that's going on. It's just all of these characters making these decisions in turn. And they're all quite understandable, you know? It's like, given the characters that have been established, the situations that they're placed in, the demands pressing on them from each side, everybody kind of just does the only thing you could imagine them doing at that point. Everything just sort of pushes the next thing forward in this causal chain of chaos and regret. But it truly is kind of like a sequential causal chain where each decision very clearly leads to the next. And all of them just sort of have to be sorted through in turn. What I appreciate is that we get to spend so much time on every stage of this grand plotline. There's 42 minutes of the romance between Anora and Ivan, I think. Vanya? Vanya and Ivan are the same, right? Vanya is like the diminutive. We get to see their whirlwind romance for the first full 42 minutes of the movie. There's really nothing else. It fully encapsulates us, sweeps us off our feet with this Cinderella-esque fantasy. We spend about an hour chasing after Vanya, and then another 40 minutes of the aftermath of everything, of that cold, harsh morning light. And I just really love this kind of broad 3-act structure. It doesn't feel like you're building up to like the point of the movie. All of these things are kind of treated as equal events, just these phases of this time in Anora's life. There isn't really like a real part that one thing is the setup for and one thing is the epilogue for. It's just how it is. It's just Anora. It's her life. It's her story. These scant few weeks that sort of changed her, but ultimately maybe also didn't. Like, she just kind of ends up where she started in a very literal sense. It's a strangely intimate portrait. She's very, very uncompromising in her character, and I think sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what she's really thinking, because she is just so adhered to her motivators, to getting what she needs out of every situation, that there's very little like internal conflict. There's very little sense of like, what is she saying just to achieve her goals, and what does she truly believe. Like, there doesn't even seem to be a dichotomy. There's not even a question. But in doing all of this, there's also like a tenderness, like where I think really meant to be endeared to her as someone who is in such a strange position and is so understandably like trying to just extract from it security and wealth and eternal happiness. um, that even if we don't really understand exactly what is real, even if we don't understand exactly how cynical she is about any given thing, we want her to be happy. Like, we understand that deep desire to just break free of every aspect of her life, and become transcendentally happy and fulfilled and safe. But just as much as this is like this individual portrait of Enora, I think it's also a very societal portrait, where we can kind of see this as like an archetypal relationship between the privileged and the unprivileged, you know, across that massive wealth gap that exists, in American society. That there are these sort of situations where it's like you have this tiny, thin, gossamer lifeline to the other side, to the side of wealth. And this is just sort of an archetypal story of like what happens when someone gets that chance. And Enora is in this situation, and then I think we're also kind of encouraged to think of Igor in the same situation, where you're thrown, you have almost no power whatsoever, but you might get pulled to that other side. Right now, you are just in this unstable conflux of two social spheres, where you shouldn't be seeing any of this, and then suddenly you have this glimpse, one toe in the door, of a totally different world, of 5 orders of magnitude more wealth, of a security that you could never dream of. Throughout everything, this is, though, the message that follows from that is like, no, you cannot get to the other side. The division of class is paramount. It is invincible. And it's a pretty downer message, but I suppose either way, it's a downer situation. It's like saying, hey, well, at least there's the lottery. Some poor people can get rich. It's like, that's not a comfort at all. And I don't know, you can think about this a lot in terms of like kind of a political message, in terms of what Sean Baker thinks about this sort of social situation that he has presented to us. Sean Baker seems to be like a total creep and a right-wing retard. I probably shouldn't say that. He's like not a good guy, and I think he's like pretty stupid, but you know, such people can make really good films, and films that sometimes are insightful in ways that they don't even intend. And it's like, I don't know. It's a big conversation. What it is that he thinks he is depicting here, who he thinks is sort of justified and righteous in these situations. It kind of comes across like he just hates everybody. And even if I walk away really liking Enora as a character, as a person, and Igor as a character, as a person, I genuinely don't know if Sean Baker wanted me to. He's quite an interesting guy. I'm very curious to see more of his films. Okay. Now let's talk about I Saw the TV Glow. I mean, given the fact that I'm trans, right, you can see the Sylveon my boyfriend got me. It's all so by the book. You want to see my blah eyes, my IKEA sharks? So yeah, I gotta follow some trans stereotypes. It's no surprise that this movie made the list. Probably more surprising is that it's not even higher, right? I would guess, if you were going to speculate on such things. But hey, look, trans people aren't a monolith. Maybe it's because I wasn't a suburbs girls TV watching type of trans person. Instead, if this movie was about posting on Mew 8 hours a day, on rural dial up, talking about post rock albums at considerable length, that's a number one contender. That might be slotted in at the top. But no, even though I can only relate to it on some axes, I do see this as a really, truly beautiful movie, but also a moment where a movie like this can come to fruition from truly such a beautiful heart. It's a story of being seen, of being recognized, and being reached out to in a precious and unprecedented way. That feeling of like true community where you've had all of these encounters your entire life with people in like preordained spaces, people you meet at school, people maybe you meet at church or at like family functions or family friends or neighborhood kids or whatever. All these places that are kind of like forced upon you where you have to go. And it's like you can very easily, I would not recommend this, but you can spend like your entire childhood going to such places and not meeting anybody that you feel like truly gets you. Meeting people that do finally get you after no one in school or church or anywhere did. And this is an experience that, again, personally I didn't have. I always knew people that I thought really got me, like my older cousins especially. And then people online. From a very early age, I would meet people online. But that's just it. It's like, even though I didn't go for long without it, I still recognize that as so important and so special, and that I was so blessed to have that sort of encounter, to have that aspect in my life of a true community of people that truly got me. I knew that is one of the most important and revelatory moments in anyone's life, especially if you're queer in any sense, especially if you're neurodivergent in any sense. That's something that will forever be like a foundational element of your life, is meeting those people that get you. But just as well as this is conveyed is the inverse of that. What if you miss out on this opportunity? What if you do not get to connect with those people, or you lose them, or you reject them, or you don't go along with them when the opportunity is given to you for any number of reasons? It's haunting. It's truly a horror movie in that sense. The horror of going your entire life not having found that true community. And conveyed best of all in a way that I found really so relatable that it gave me chills. Depicted in the scene that we just screen capped is like this oblique, contradictory at times, semi-manic, but then also full of the most real shit you'll ever encounter journey of thought and action that actualizes, motivates, and manifests the plunge through to the other side of transition. I'm not gonna, trans people are not a monolith, but most trans people I know go through a real challenging, complex, revelatory period. Even, people that understood transness from an early age, even people that understood who they are from an early age, the decision to transition, the decision of like what you want your life to be, what you want it to look like, what you want to look like, not to put too fine a point on it. All of these decisions, all of these like grasps at identity require like so much introspective work, so much kind of like self codification, almost creating like your own internal language of memes, You'd start to feel almost manic because you're kind of just constructing this whole potential reality in your mind that you're going to kind of leap into by transitioning. I've never seen a movie depict so accurately and so compellingly what that kind of feels like and how it feels to express that. This is a truly sprawling, a let's do everything type of movie where you can really tell that the director, they had smaller budget projects in the past. Those went really well. We're all going to the World's Fair. What a banger. And now they've got a lot of money. They've got a major distributor. They've got great acting talent. They've got actually the acting talent and We're All Going to the World's Fair was phenomenal as well. I'm not implying anything by that, but it's like now they can do everything they wanted to, and they chose to do everything. It's a tonal roller coaster, a visual smorgasbord of a film. And in the end, it's like you can take a look at a lot of individual things in it and ask like, well, does that really work? Does that add to the movie? Did we need that? Why is that there? Whatever. And it's like, I really just don't think that's the sort of questions you should be asking. Like, that's not what this film is about. It's not about whether things work. It's like this real personal expression. It's like what being trans is about. Transitioning isn't about picking a list of things that work. It's not about a series of choices where there's a correct and incorrect answer. It's just about you. It's just about getting to the other side of yourself, being who you want to be, and there's no other qualifiers beyond that. And the movie, I think, really succeeds in having me feel that type of way towards it. Yeah, great, wonderful movie. Can't wait to see what they do next. I want to say the next thing they've announced is a remake of the horror movie Sleepaway Camp, which I haven't actually seen, but I know what the twist is, which is Okay, so we'll look forward to that. All right, I'm gonna check my Discord notifications quickly. Whoops, didn't expect it to pop up on the screen, but that's fine. There was no DMs opening, so that's all good. All right, sweet. All right, now we're gonna talk about this lovely collection of ladies singing here. This is Caught by the Tides, a project of deep memory by acclaimed and enduring director Jia Zhangge. First, assembling a collage of B-roll. So, in the process of shooting a movie, you shoot a lot more than just what ends up on the screen, right? You have tons of alternate takes. You have B-roll that you feel like you might edit in to kind of accompany in a scene. So you're just shooting stuff happening in whatever setting you're working in. Establishing shots, you need a big library of those to introduce scenes. A lot of work gets done in location scouting, where advance crews will come out and just shoot a whole bunch of locations in an area so that the director can decide where they're going to actually position each shot. And that might accompany some interviews with locals, asking them about what buildings are used for and blah, 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 blah. And you end up with hundreds of hours for every actual cinematic hour of just stuff. And Caught by the Tides, in a very ambitious, very creative project, seeks to assemble a collage of these things collected across all sorts of different films made across decades in different sub-mediums. Some of them shot on films, some of them shot on camcorder, on VHS, some of them shot digitally in multiple different areas of digital fidelity across cities with different crews, different casts, weaving them into this pseudo narrative where you have recurring quote unquote characters that appear in multiple different shots, constructing sort of sequences where it's very clear a setting is being introduced and things are sort of being investigated. And even, including some takes and excerpts of movies where clear narrative stuff is happening, dialogue is happening, events are happening. But really, it's like there's still no plot. There's still no like sense of a consequential series of events that all relate to defined characters. Instead, it's just this long, winding tapestry of feelings and images built with only these essentials, which basically constitutes everything but the plot. And oh man, I've honestly, this is gonna sound strange, but I've honestly fantasized on many occasions about, man, I wish this movie didn't have a plot. It does sound strange, but I think a lot of movies could be improved if you just remove the plot. If you remove the part that's like supposed to make sense, the part where like scenes have to happen in a specific order, and you're supposed to like care about that stuff, and instead just presented this assemblage of just characters acting for whatever reason, like true observation of scenes, just stuff happening. Like, okay, this is one that comes to mind because at the time it came out, I talked a lot to a lot of people, so I really wanted them to understand my thesis of like, this movie would literally be like 1,000 times better if there was no plot. If you removed all of the scenes where the plot happens and just replaced them with like stuff happening in the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario running around and jumping for no discernible purpose, characters just sort of like saying vague things to each other that don't really make sense to the viewer, just showing you like like a nature documentary almost. But even nature documentaries end up having plots. You know what I'm saying though? Like you're just there. I just want to be there. I don't want a plot. It's so hypnotic, so gently embracing. It's both seamlessly like very aesthetic, like the moods that get built over the course of a few scenes are so situated in time and place. Like sometimes they feel so nostalgic. They start playing Butterfly, I remember that banger Butterfly. Green, black, and blue make the colors of the sky. Ooh, that's a heater. And it feels so like pitch perfect in like establishing those scenes. But at the same time, it's like really raw and really real. Like it really captures that feeling of probably a lot of these things being shot not with like direction, not with guidance to a set of actors, but just establishing shots in a location where they're like, okay, well maybe we're going to shoot something in the movie here. Do you mind if we just shoot what's happening right now so we can get a sense of the vibe of the place? I don't know, just like straddling those two lines is so amazing. Just remembering that like all of these sort of aesthetics we have, all of these sort of conceptions of scenes and moments and whatever, those are all based on real things. Like those, all of these sort of Platonic ideals existed somewhere. And the challenge of how this movie was made, essentially kind of recasting the same performers into new characters across films. So in particular, the main actor and actress of quite a few of his movies, I did not write down their names and I have no clue what they are. Great job. He takes footage of them in each movie where they're playing different characters, but then weaves them together in a way that suggests it's the same person going through like multiple different events and stages in their lives. And that's so cool that he's able to do that coherently. Like that's such a cool challenge to undertake, to figure out how you can cut together this sort of footage in order to really suggest that. It's another really thought-provoking concept. It's executed so cleverly and gracefully. It doesn't draw too much attention to itself, though. It's not like a spectacle where you're like, oh my god, she's going still life mode. Ooh, I know what this is. I did like clap when I saw it and recognized it, but well, I didn't actually clap. It's the meme. But it doesn't draw any unnecessary attention to the fact that this is kind of the trick it's doing. You're just kind of drawn into it, and only later, in retrospect, do you recognize how many small choices kind of led you along that path. And having established this swirling non-plot, after we enjoy that for maybe an hour or so, the film shifts gears really radically, and we plunge into new footage shot in the now, and it very, very much feels like the now. And it hits like the future. It's like crazy how alien and strange the present moment feels after we've been awash in China of years past for so long. Like, what? Everybody's wearing masks? Is there like a plague happening? Why? What are all these news stories about? Oh, this guy's a star on TikTok? What the hell is TikTok? What is this man doing? What are these videos? What are people watching on these strange rectangles? Like, it's really well done to just make it so dissonant, and suddenly moving to like hyper modern, hyper clear digital photography as well. And it's no, there's not too much long in the segment. It's not too long. It's a short, simple glimpse at these two kind of non-characters, but at the same time sort of characters that now they sort of feel like all of his characters, not even just all the ones that those actors and actresses that the actor and actress played, but like all of his actors, all of his actresses, all of these roles sort of being consolidated into these like omni characters that almost feel like just the actor and actress themselves. In this small, tender moment of reconnection, of catharsis, and of departure. It's like this little private conversation that we happen to witness, where it doesn't even feel like movie, but of the director and his dear friends, these actors and actresses that he's been working with for decades and decades. It's like we just happen to witness this really intimate moment between them where they kind of acknowledge and celebrate this long career together of making movies. Really beautiful. All right, next, let me make sure. Okay, I don't know what they're talking about. That's fine. This is another water-themed movie, now that I think about it, where the title is water-themed. This is By the Stream, another touching vignette by the hyper-prolific Hong Sang-soo. I feel like this is probably mentioned every time people discuss his works. I feel kind of bad that I'm just going through those motions again, but man, this dude makes a lot of movies. He makes pretty much every year 2 movies a year. Year after year after year. He makes 2 movies every year. Sometimes even more. Sometimes it bumps up to 3. And I think the question that demands that you can't help but ask is how? How the hell do you make movies that quickly? And then when you see it in a positive way, you're like, oh, actually that makes sense. And what I mean by that is that there's this really wonderful naturalism that is at the heart of why I love everything I've seen by him so much, that emerges, I think, very consequentially in lockstep from a true economy of time and effort. So it's this almost Dogma 95 adherent movie where there is like no real artificiality with the settings. It's clear that he just goes into naturally inhabited spaces, films them as they are. The editing is not at all elaborate. You know, most shots only have a couple different angles that extend for quite long sequences. There's no real drama. There's nothing that requires real elaborate camera rigs or dollies or anything like that. Very little happens outside of diegesis. I think there's some light soundtracking, but nothing that demands, again, like weeks in the editing booth after everything is done. It may actually qualify for Dogma. I don't know. Probably there's some like very straightforward things that disqualify it, like maybe the soundtracking, if I'm right in remembering that. I think is a no-go. But they could quite easily, I think, in this mode, in this spirit, adhere to all of the Dogma 95 demands. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Dogma 95. I'm too lazy to explain it, but it's quite interesting. And aligned with another kind of big, more attitude of Dogma 95. This is something that wasn't in the actual requirements, but was heavily encouraged, which is no artificiality of emotion, no contrivedness, nothing kind of outside the norm of human life and the human condition, nothing that's so bizarre or abhorrent or rare. And so we have this plot line and these performances that demand not very much in the way of like contrived emotion. Like there's no element of the performance that is like, guess what? Your son was murdered. How do you feel? And then they have to moan and wail and do all of these other, really outside of the normal scope of life type reactions. So most scenes are just these very freewheeling conversations between people who are certainly playing characters, but the characters are all quite grounded, quite reasonable, and therefore, yeah, don't really require so much of a performance as just sort of being yourself while keeping kind of your character's perspective in mind. Making you imagine that probably, yeah, like little rehearsal is likely necessary for these. I would imagine a lot of these can be captured just sort of on the first take. Probably just by shooting long conversations and then editing together kind of the central points. There's probably very little writing that's necessary in some situations. I'm not really sure how these are written. It could be that all of the lines are written out, but even then, it's like so much of it is just that very naturalistic dialogue where people are just making small talk, discussing events in their lives, discussing their interests, discussing their current projects at this university. That it's like, it doesn't really demand all that much like imagination in terms of what are these characters going to say to each other. There's already sort of something that makes sense for them to say to each other. And so maybe it's a consequence that this is how it emerges, or maybe it's like by being motivated to have this consistent or continuous output. Regardless of this sort of chicken egg truth, what is the efficiency being created by the output, like being demanded by the output, or is the output just an opportunity that emerges from wanting to make movies like this? The effect of it is truly, truly profound. The movie that results from this attitude, from this conservation of time and effort, is really profoundly unique and in my mind extremely, extremely enjoyable. It feels like you truly inhabit this space. Inhibit? Oh no! You truly inhabit the space. You truly live alongside these characters. And it feels like you're given like a nice warm welcome into the world of the film. It's neither like voyeuristic or performed. It doesn't feel like they're making, a big fuss about you. You just kind of feel like another guest at the table of the many tables that occupy this movie of drinking and eating. Reinforced in this case by our kind of main character, the character whose perspective we kind of align ourselves with. I suppose he isn't really the main character. It's more his niece that's the main character, but as I said, he's kind of more the focalized character in a lot of ways. His uncle, or her uncle, sorry, that gets really immersed into the setting, that is welcome to the university, that is given this role in consulting and directing the skit that the characters are performing. And that really draws you in. And there's these moments of slight intrigue, the uncle's past is mysterious, and there's incidents in the past that are alluded to. Small kind of discoveries that you make along the way about the relationships of the characters and things that have happened. And just many, many really heartfelt discussions around really interesting topics that I think really magnetize me towards this film. And plenty of good meals. I just love the way characters eat in this movie. The tteokbokki, the soju, grilled meats. What could be better, man? What a treat. It's nothing I think draws you into a movie than truly feeling like you're sharing a meal with the characters. All right, we are rolling along into our top 6. We have, of course, an anime film on this list. Who would I be if we didn't? This is the adaptation of Fujimoto's one-shot manga Look Back. And, you know, this is maybe spoilers for a movie or a video I want to make in the future, which would be like top 10 artistic mediums or something silly. But spoiler alert, if I did such a video, number 1 would be manga. It is my favorite medium in art ever for so many reasons that maybe I'll get into in the video. So I have a lot of feelings about manga. I'm very opinionated about manga, and I have just so much love for it. And this is an intimate parable about mangaka, about their trials, their triumphs, their joys. And I feel like the overwhelming and complex feelings I have about this film are therefore quite natural. Like, how could I not be as moved and drawn into this as I was? Because for me, it's not just the story as told, not just these characters, or not even like the archetypes of characters I think they represent, not just the specific comics that they themselves draw and the specific career that we see depicted. But Look Back just sort of feels like this look at an archetype of mangaka as a whole. That this is a story about what mangaka are as like a type of people, as a profession, as a passion, as an art, as a craft. Anything that really taps into that and makes me convinced that what I'm seeing in some sense is authentic or meaningful in portraying that sliver of the human condition, the human condition of those who draw like this, that really fills me up. That just completely saturates my interest. You know, and mangaka are a diverse group in every way you can think of. They're not even all Japanese, you know? I'll toss in manhwa, I'll toss in Western comic creators that produce works in a similar fashion. But they are all connected by this work, by drawing. Drawing. And maybe, you know, it's my Protestant upbringing. And deep down, you know, I'm a lazy person. I'm not going to lie. I'm a pretty lazy person in a lot of ways. I put off a lot of chores and stuff that I don't want to do. I don't volunteer my time on difficult tasks that don't interest me. And I certainly try to do as little as possible for my job. I do not really aspire to be a hard worker or go-getter when it comes to my career. That's where I'm very tactical about how I apply my time. But despite all of that, deep down, I think I still have the sentiment that good work, good, hard, meaningful work is the foundation of a good life. And so in this artisanal but also artistic world of manga, where people draw page after page, day after day, where it doesn't really stop, there's always another chapter, there's always another series, there's always another page, there's always another panel. Seeing that before me, it fills me with such a strong, glad feeling, such an appreciation that just spirals out from there into one of all of humanity, of all of the efforts of humanity. You know, I think most of the evil in this world, there's a lot of horrible things in this world, I can't attribute much of it to hard workers. The people who do harm in this world, I shouldn't generalize too much, but like, so much horrible thing is done out of like a greed, not just for power or money or wealth, but a greed for laziness, a greed of delegation, a greed of escape. And to me, the hardworking side is like the foundation of all good in humanity. But yeah, but putting that aside, that got kind of heavy. I don't even know if I agree with what I said. I just started spitting. So let's move aside from that. Let's just talk about the story as it is. Beyond it being some archetype of the glory of hard work, this is an intimate story of two kids making manga. And I think, like, for me, it really clicked. I was really just drawn in on such an emotional level from the very second early on in the movie where Fujimo, who has been writing these little comics for her fifth grade class newspaper, they're very silly, they're very goofy. She sees the reclusive, non class attending Kyomoto, her art, which is included in one issue of the student newspaper, and she is shocked and dismayed and flabbergasted by how much better Kyomoto's art is than hers. And they play it for a laugh. She makes a very goofy face, and it's a good laugh. But man, I was like, I get it. That is a moment that will define the entire rest of her life if she lets it. And of course she does. As the relationship evolves from rivals to comrades to partners to who knows what. I don't want to spoil the story. The story twists into this kind of pseudo supernatural. It's debatable exactly what the hell is going on. Story of loss, but then transcendental redemption. It's still like, I think that moment was so real. The moment where she sees Kyomoto's art was just so perfectly real and like core to human experience. That glimpse at something beyond that just completely changes your relationship with not only your hobby, but kind of like what you think you're going to do for the rest of your life. Everything felt equally real. It all felt grounded in that moment, which is why this movie is just so good. I thought I had one more point. Whatever. We're moving into the top 5. Let me check. They're talking about sports, sure. We are talking about rumors. We see an assemblage here of presidents and prime ministers from the G7 nations. So what else could it be but rumors? We're in the for real ones only zone. You know, look back. Yeah, okay, it kind of has like an extra special appeal to otaku and to mangaka and animators. My friend who's a professional animator said it's now his favorite anime movie. It's someone that I've talked a lot about like anime and manga and stuff with, so that definitely biased me. I was like, whoa. Anyways, putting that aside, it's a pretty approachable movie. I think it's like a fun one, kind of. But rumors and beyond, we are in the real ones only zone now. There's gonna be one exception, but we'll get to it. First up in the top 5 is this eccentric Canadian multimedia artist Guy Maddin, coming out with his latest and definitely biggest movie, a goofy, semi-political, not really, farce where the G7 leaders wander through this vague, bizarre, apocalyptic scenario, inexplicably starring Cate Blanchett, in a move that probably tricked a lot of people into seeing this. A lot of people who did not know what they were getting into, and I find that very, very funny. Movies like this really highlight to me how individual and inexplicable our sense of humor is. Because I find this movie like really, really funny. Like, I was laughing out loud at almost every scene. And I cannot really explain why. The range of comedy is so broad that it feels like hard to imagine that it would all work for any one person, that there's really anything in common between all these different modes. Sometimes it's dumb slapstick, it's just silly, goofy humor. sometimes it goes into these sequences of like extended soap opera parody where the lights turn like pink and you feel like you're watching a telenovela or something, and it's just about like the torrid love affairs of the Canadian Prime Minister. It's just so silly. Sometimes it's very unedgy, very meaningless political satire that really begins and does not go any further with like, aren't they dumb? Aren't our elected officials like, they're pretty dumb? And it's almost like they're too dumb to really be the subject of any more advanced political satire, because there's no like other element. It's just them out there in the woods utterly failing to come to any conclusions about what's happening, utterly failing to make any sort of decisive action to help themselves, in a context where they're all meeting up to propose a message that will be given to the world about the mysterious ongoing crisis, but they're really kind of too dumb to come up with anything. They just speak in platitudes, and they're just obsessed with like famous speeches of the past. I think in one scene they're reading like famous speeches magazines. And it's like not really political satire. Like it doesn't really point to any real world leader. You can say, oh, what's his face? Charles Dance playing the American Prime Minister is meant to be like a Biden parody because he's like really, really old and he like falls asleep. But I think that's like just a coincidence. I think that was more the silliness of having a British dude play the American Prime Minister and use a British accent. That's like the real joke. And then all the old people jokes just sort of followed because they got an old dude to do it. Like there's no edge, there's no like pointing aspect of it. It's just it's like refreshing in that sense. It's very refreshing in that sense to me. They're not trying to make any sort of point. There's no pretense to it at all. It's just like very broad, like, yeah, they're freaking clowns in there, aren't they? And that's true. We can't forget that that's true. They're dumb. Sometimes very anticlimactic banter, you know, like something extraordinarily weird will happen and then they'll chat about it as if it, not that it was normal, but they'll just be so nonchalant about it that it's funny. Sometimes in a mode sort of similar to Wes Anderson, they have just these very quirky characters that are kind of doing their shtick, which I find very funny. Sometimes it's like very sitcomish A-B plot collisions that really delight me because they foreshadow them really nicely, and you start to kind of put the pieces together of what disastrous thing is going to happen when these two plot lines collide. Sometimes it's just like true absurdism, just utter nonsense for the spectacle of it, just to increase the absurd quotient of the movie. Zombies jacking off, the famous giant brain, and there's like no rhyme or reason for it. There's no like winking, and you know what this means. No, you're not meant to know what that means. It's a giant brain. The giant brain is a game changer. On top of this laughs, it's a really weird and hypnotizing cinematography. It's mostly, you know, just our crew stumbling around in the woods. It kind of reminds me of, on Red Letter Media, they're always talking about really low budget movies. Most of them see the cast spending a lot of time just stumbling around in the woods because it's like free to shoot there. But the framing and the lighting, the way everything unfolds, to me it's just like really enchanting, like some really, really beautiful scenes. Many scenes pulled me in so much, just as much as the next round of gags left me just reeling way out in hysterics. Great stuff. Now let's talk about number 4, Trap, baby. The new M. Night Shyamalan banger. I am so grateful to witness the discourse pendulum swing back a bit on this one. Still, the discourse is violent and intense, and I see fights about this movie break out on Twitter like every day. But it seems like more and more people are getting it. The getting it constituency grows in power, and I'm seeing it show up on like a lot of critics lists, a lot of year-end lists from critics that I find very respectable, that put other much more like traditionally acclaimed movies that don't have these sorts of controversies around them. They're recognizing Trap. They're understanding just how freaking good this movie is. The takes I saw about it around release are not the stupidest takes I've seen about a movie this year, but are second place in stupidity to the movie that ranks at number 2. So you can guess and anticipate what that will be. Who wrote this? Is M. Night an alien? Has he ever talked to a human being before? Everyone talks so weird in this movie. That's not how people talk. It's like, okay, well, what? Did you want this to be like a mumblecore movie? Huh? You don't like genre-heightened dialogue where the mood and suspense of a scene or the comedic escalation of a scene demands people to speak in a way that they wouldn't in normal life? Is that not okay with you? Oh, I guess we better throw out every Hitchcock movie ever then. I guess we better throw out every Kubrick movie ever then. Oh, has Kubrick ever talked to a human? Everyone in 2001 talks so weird. What the fuck is this premise? It makes no sense. Why are they trying to catch a serial killer at a concert? I think that that's just an excuse so he can have his daughter have a big pop concert. It's a vanity project. Nepo baby. Like, okay, so you're telling me that if you're a movie director and you get a big multi-billion-dollar budget, you're not allowed to turn your daughter into Beyonce and let her be Beyonce on stage and have crazy on-stage cinematic perspectives just because it doesn't make sense? Okay, now movies have to make sense? Okay, well then let's throw out every movie. Is this supposed to be funny? How did he expect to take this seriously? Yes. It's supposed to be funny. Like, I literally, I don't understand how people don't get that this is funny. Like, people that are like, it's so bad, I'm laughing at it. No, you're laughing at it because it's supposed to be funny. Like, I can't understand, besides, like, people's stupidity, like, people actually just being too stupid to understand how comedies work. Maybe they've never seen a comedy in their lives. Like, what? It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But yeah, this is a very, very funny movie. I cannot remember many times that I've laughed this hard in a theater before. Almost right off the jump. And it's not that I went in hearing that it was like an uproariously funny movie. I actually hadn't heard like pretty much anything about this at all. But it's just apparent to me that when you have a movie where it's like, I don't know, what was the first thing that really made me laugh? I think it's when he goes to the merch table and the guy's like, yeah, we're trying to catch this serial killer. You seem cool though, man. And he like immediately goes to the bathroom and it's revealed like super explicitly that he's the serial killer. Because I remember going in and thinking, ooh, maybe the twist is going to be that the dad is the serial killer. And in retrospect, that's like very obvious. But just the way they juxtapose those two scenes and this like comically explicit reveal where he's like watching a webcam footage of some guy he's kidnapped. They call him the Butcher. It's like people make games type of dialogue and it's like so absurdly convenient. And then just the look on his face. Oh, it's so good. But okay, but there's more. There's more. Once you can succumb to this really hyper real writing and just embrace this bizarre setup that okay, this is what the movie's gonna be about. He's trying to get out of the concert. It really opens up on a lot of different dimensions. It becomes really enjoyable on every level. I love this sort of like in and out of jams type thriller, where our main character just has this like wild agency. He's just capable of doing anything. even though he's like very much underpowered in this situation, if he's caught, it's GG, it's game over. But to avoid getting caught, he's capable of anything. That's just so exciting to watch. Just the way each problem presents itself, and then he cleverly swerves out of it. He just busts through these walls of convention. He's truly the Superman, reducing things down to just this physical, lawless level where it's like, man, if all it takes is dumping a bunch of ice in the deep fryer to create a gigantic accident to cause a distraction so you can grab an apron and try to get into a restricted staff area, it's like there's nothing physically stopping you from doing that. You can put ice in the deep fryer anytime you like. There's nothing stopping you. While fully exploring the unique trappings, no pun intended, of this pop giga concert, which I think more and more is becoming kind of like a new holy spot in our pop culture sensibilities, the new pinnacle of like cultural moment. Before it might be the Super Bowl, before it might be, I don't know, like a music festival or something. But there's a lot of unique aspects to these gigantic, like 4 hour long, multiple intermission. Every song is like a new outfit and a new stage and crazy choreography. This sort of pop concert, I think, obviously best exemplified by the Taylor Swift Eras tour. It's really cool, like seeing this now being utilized for this very modern type of thriller that takes advantage of it. And then, in true M. Night fashion, right when you're satisfied with that and you're like, hey, I get it. That was a great movie, kind of short. Boom. No, that was just the first half. There's a whole other movie lurking in the back half that I won't even get into. It is a bizarre roller coaster. It's I don't know if it really makes the movie better, but it is just so full of crazy moments and strange performances and really uproariously funny scenes. Definitely makes it more memorable. All right. Now, as we move into our top three, we take a little break from the movies for freaks. Talk about something with some real mainstream appeal as I get a drink. This is definitely the highest grossing movie on this list. I think this made like $2 billion. This is, of course, Inside Out 2. Here's our normie break. Yeah, a movie that made, here I guessed $1 million. I think it actually made $2 million. It's absurd. A movie that, although building off one of the most unique and ambitious Pixar films, really is just like, here's some more sequel. It's the exact same structure of, we see scenes depicting her real life outside, and then we go inside the head to see the internal battles and struggles of her constituent emotions that are kind of driving the ship. But now, of course, there's more emotions. And although the original is maybe my favorite Pixar movie ever, and I really, really protested the idea of this when it was announced, I was pretty bummed out. Just because it seemed to be proof that Pixar is in full, like, sequel addiction mode and basically is trying to cash in on every hit they've had. It just felt so unnecessary. I felt like it was certainly going to tarnish what I think is like a near perfect movie, the first one. It turns out I actually just did want more. That I once I started watching it, I realized, my love for the original is so great. Yeah, you know what? I could do with some more. I enjoy this premise so much, this structure. Why not? And so the key concept here, of course, is now our girl is reaching puberty, and so new emotions come in and wreak havoc. And that's like probably the first thing they came up with. Same with this idea that most of the main events of the movie are going to be centered around anxiety as a new character, as a new emotion, and the influence she has when driving the body. And many of the events just kind of write themselves from that setups, you know? Okay, let's think about lots of stuff associated with puberty. Okay, now let's think about how to represent that metaphorically in a place where all of the brain is like a physical space. Sure. All right, all right, these are the cringe repressed memories. They're in like a big jail. This is the sarcasm chasm, where a gigantic gulf between intent and perception causes her to be sarcastic in real life. Okay, there's like the dream factory, where they animate dreams for her to experience as she sleeps. Oh no, that got hijacked by anxiety, and now she's having these really anxious nightmares. It's all very first day of writing. You can knock all of those out. All illustrating, very real and very relatable, and I think important elements of that age, but very typical moments, This idea of having a sense of self that can no longer accommodate absolutely everything, that not absolutely every experience and choice you've made feels cohesive anymore. So now you have to start making really hard decisions about who you are and what is actually important to you. Again, it's like, yeah, that's probably one of the first things you think of as a major dilemma for this movie. But it's important, and that's real, and that's complex. So despite all of this very kind of first draft cliched setup, this is a far fresher, far more interesting movie than I expected. The IRL scenario is really compelling. It's a radically hard, like genuinely difficult situation she ends up in. And it's a real departure from what I expected from like the IRL scenario. I thought for sure it would be like first crush or like embarrassing incident or our parents are getting divorced. Someone in the family dies. A pet dies. Any number of things. But they went with something that is very, very far from cliche. Something that I think is like very niche on a number of different levels. But really, really interesting. And I think very well chosen and constructed for a story like this. She is in this intensely competitive hockey camp where kids that have shown enthusiasm and talent for hockey have been gathered up from all these different middle schools. And basically, if she does really well in this, she's going to attract the attention of the coach in her high school, which could mean big, big things for her, hockey playing career in the next 4 years. It really swerves around anything like trite or cliched. Even giving that setup, you're probably predicting certain things. But instead, it's like actually pretty brutal and pretty raw around just a lot of the inherent contradictions and impossibilities in competition. Like, it really delves into it in a way that I am much more used to seeing in like adult stories. Questions of to what extent should you sacrifice your friendships, your ability to socialize, your ability to kind of like exist outside the world of the game in order to improve at the game? What does improving at the game really mean? Like, what are your goals in competition? Is it actually to just win the game? Is it to stand out in some way? Is it to improve? Is it to broaden your relationships and deepen them? It like asks these questions like very unflinchingly in a way where it's not like, okay, well, obviously she's going to come to conclusion XYZ, but in like a very intense anxiety driven situation where it's like not entirely clear. Like, you're like, oh, well, she should be kind to her friends, but it's very understandable why she also wants to just perform to the absolute peak of her ability, you know? And if those two things are in conflict, it's actually kind of tough. And yeah, in the end, it confronts these kind of harsh impossibilities in a major climactic moment in a way that I think is so honest and so beautiful, where it's like, guess what? You might not be able to figure this stuff out, and you might break down, and it might feel awful. But that's not the end. It's just hockey camp. Your people will support you. People are there for you. You can ask for help. You don't have to figure this out all on your own. It's really, really, really nice. Blue Walk isn't gonna end like that. Slam Dunk isn't gonna end like that. Well, Slam Dunk already ended, you know what I'm saying. Really, really nice stuff. Beautiful movie. Okay. Next, let's talk about. I'm sure a few of you guessed that this was coming. It's Megalopolis, baby. This is the controversy of the year. An amorphous riddle of a maximal blockbuster. Generating the most infuriating, sure, even more infuriating than Trap. So many people that I'm just like, are you stupid? But also some of the most fruitful discourse of the year. The conversations I've had about this movie have been so fun, so eye-opening. The range of perspectives people have about this on both positive and negative camps are so wide and so diverse and so rich. I've just had a hoot. Every conversation I've had about this movie has been so fun, so compelling, so interesting. Whether it's trying to puzzle out what the hell the consequence of certain plot points are, or the symbolism between different decisions in directorial intent. What is the messaging of the movie? What was intentional? What was supposed to be funny? What was just accidentally funny? There's so much to discuss. Everyone who loved it and everyone who hated it all did so for reasons that wildly differed, but inexplicably overlapped at times. And it feels like everyone who saw this has a very passionate, extreme take on it. And of course I loved it. I put it at number 2 on this list. And I genuinely think this is an excellent movie, besides 3 things that are important, yeah, but not all important. The messaging, which is, I think, at best incomprehensible. Like, I think the most charitable reading of this movie is, okay, well, it just doesn't make sense. And Francis Ford Coppola is senile, and he wasn't saying anything coherent with this. That's the best possible interpretation. And at worst, I think you can argue a thesis for sure that this movie is just some, like, real Randian bullshit. I land somewhere in the middle. I think this movie is meaningful. I think some of the things it's saying are very disagreeable. But I also think some of the things it's saying are very interesting and reflect really kind of obscured perspectives on filmmaking. That a lot of the messaging of this movie, I think, is actually about filmmaking and has been transposed onto architecture and urbanism and municipal politics and stuff. But I can get into this for hours. The plot, I also think, is bad because it doesn't make any sense. It is a total blitz of nonsense. There is so much stuff that happens, and none of it matters, like, at all. Basically, every scene just sets up the next scene and then stops being important at all. And it's such a strange kind of juvenile way of writing. It's almost like a dreamlike logic that has no memory. And I think it really reflects that he has been working on the script for like 40 years and just adding, and never removing anything. And when he comes up with an idea for a big new sequence, a big new plot point, it really doesn't matter what's come before. Blam, it's in there. A satellite is falling. This is a hostile takeover. Megalopolis is real. and everything before it immediately recedes into meaninglessness. That is not really a good plot. That ain't Shakespeare. Even though the characters quote Shakespeare a lot, that is not how that man wrote. But you know what? That doesn't matter. I would rather it be like this and have every scene that it has than to remove anything to make it more sensible. And, the production was horrible. Basically, every rule was broken. Unions were scabbed the hell out of it, and I think that's very noticeable on certain, CGI effects. Also, I'm going to call this out again, because I haven't seen anybody else talk about it. There's a scene where a bunch of people are protesting in a park, and Shia LaBeouf is riling them up on a tree stump that inexplicably looks like a swastika. And people are holding up signs in different languages. And already I'm not really sure why. But they are. And somebody is holding up a sign that's supposed to be in Japanese, but the Roman character, the Latin character, lowercase b, inexplicably is in the middle of the Japanese text. And the Japanese text is nonsense. And what that results from is when you switch your keyboard language from English to Japanese and you start typing, but you make a typo and you put in another B, it won't latch on and create a character. So imagine you're trying to make B and you put BBU, it'll just be B, B, which I think is literally what happened. And they didn't notice. And then someone painted it on the sign. And it was this is what they didn't send their best. He got these crews on the cheap. And yeah, basically every actor with problematic accusations, cancelable history, or just generally has a reputation of not being great to work with. It's the Avengers of such people all reunited. But hey, this isn't the Good People Awards. As a shout out to my boyfriend, he's writing some stuff about wrestling and used that phrase, and I thought, yeah, that's a good phrase. So I nabbed it. Yeah, so that's all very gross, and we don't really want to encourage movie making like this. But, it is what it is. A lot of directors are big scumbags. Sean Baker, that we just talked about, is a huge scumbag. It's just the way it works, and you just have to watch the movie. Putting minor issues, like the plot and the messaging aside, this is such a phenomenal, gigantic, everything all at once cinematic experience. Every sequence is just a spectacle. Every line I find hilarious or genuinely clever. It's either funny because it intends to be funny, it's clever because it intends to be clever, or it intends to be clever and it's not, and then it turns out to be funny. So that's 100% success rate. Every moment of this movie just grabs me. It makes me feel giddy watching it. The ludicrous, inexplicable plot is just a necessary consequence of having everything, of just putting all of these ideas into one movie. It's like Final Fantasy VII, man. I'm replaying Final Fantasy VII. The plot is great. It really is great. But a lot of the stuff you do makes no sense. And it makes no difference. And you're just doing it because it's awesome. The Narrow-Minded Cowards, years down the line, I think we're gonna see the pendulum swing back. There will be a critical reappraisal. This will be recognized as a classic. But I'll remember the doubting and the hedge betting that's happening now. I'm putting it on the line. I'm putting it on the list. I'm putting the list on YouTube. This is a banger, and I can't wait for the world to catch up and recognize that. Alright. But it's not number one. There is a movie that I put even higher than this. What could it possibly be? Oh, baby. Matt Farley, the nicest guy in showbiz? No way. music and comedy every Friday night, 7 p.m. at Tapley Hall. Free. This is Local Legends Bloodbath, the #1 movie of the year. I watched this and the first movie just on a whim, you know? There was this TIFF kind of pre-local where before the festival proper, this kind of underground movie collective was showing a few kind of more underground projects, and we got tickets because the new Conor O'Malley Rap World was going to debut there. And, you know, as I said, I was a big Conor O'Malley fan. So I was like, ooh, okay, let's check out what else is going to be there. Oh, Local Legends Bloodbath. Let's watch the original Local Legends. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, we got tickets for Rap World. But then after I watched the original Local Legends in preparation for this rocketed up past as the thing I was most excited for. In the span of the month, Matt Farley went from a total unknown, wouldn't know him from Adam, hadn't heard his name before, to my hero, just a beacon in terms of what individual creators can do, what you can make happen in your life truly through artistic passion and little else, to my dear friend who retweeted me twice. That makes us friends. Like, Local Legends, I think that was like a truly life-changing experience. And this video is long enough. I don't know if I can really sufficiently get into how it affected me and how it changed the way I think about creating art. But it really just felt like I was very rapidly getting up to speed with this true genius that had gone undiscovered by me until now. And then meeting him in person, hearing him speak, and then especially seeing the sequel after that, what a whirlwind in just the span of a month. It has everything I loved best in the first movie, as, you know, it kind of has to, given that his movie-making method has not substantially changed. The endearing, zero-budget, pretty much zero rehearsal aesthetic, assembled of just whatever's at hand, his friends asking them if they want to be in a movie, the sets, just random houses of friends that agreed to let him film there, his own house, most predominantly, hilarious dialogue that gravitates around personality quirks, very, very fun, very quirky characters in this movie, like definitely playing up their strangeness in some ways, but still really falling within the scope of the kind of people you meet in these scenes, the kind of people you meet in these places. Just sort of reminding you that the world is full of such interesting, funny people. Internal memes. You know, this movie very quickly establishes its own language of putting the finger on the zeitgeist, and no good deed goes unpunished, and statement analysis, and you know, it doesn't even feel like a running joke or a callback, but rather just the way the language sort of evolves, and these strange fixations. Matt Farley's character especially, of course, loves his coffee milk, is constantly obsessing over the first Local Legends, how it was cut, what was left out of it, how it was received. Just this character that is so occupied by these things. It's almost like a Larry David neuroses, but in such strange directions. And it's all about this wholly self-actualized one-of-one artist, Matt Farley, who makes a living recording poop songs predominantly. This is hopefully not news to anyone. He's quite famous now. But Matt Farley basically set out to game the Spotify, Apple Music, whatever systems by just releasing tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of songs that he just thought people were likely to search. Like, if you're a bored kid on iTunes, maybe you're just going to search your own name. And if there's a song that pops up that's called, like, Devin's Song, hey, maybe you're going to pay 99 cents to listen to it. This is his entire game plan, and in order to facilitate this, He just records songs about every name plus poop, celebrity plus poop, poop plus pee plus celebrity, just anything he can think of that he thinks people might search. And this works. It works well enough that now he can fund his lifestyle. In real life, putting aside the movie and the character, he funds, his family. He lives a comfortable, lovely family life. He makes these other movies. The in-universe version overlaps in a very strange way that I find compelling. But the in-universe version as well is just desperately making these songs all the time, trying to stay afloat. Magic Puddle, it's another upcoming release. Sounds like a banger. But in the original Local Legends, it's this kind of self-lionizing adventure where everybody loves him and everybody finds him so fascinating, and he just kind of wins and wins and wins. Bloodbath instead is this scathing parade of punishment where now everybody hates him, mocks him, cheats on him, shits all over his work. His strange exploits are now stripped bare and re-rendered as this annoying, egotistical, delusional twat. And it's like pretty scathing. Like, that the intent isn't to be genuinely scathing, and that the character and the real life Matt Farley are separate enough that it's not like it's this brutal cry for help or anything. But it is quite an amazing character analysis. Like, there's this long scene where one of his friends is saying, you don't really do nice things for people because it's nice. You do nice things for people because you think it makes a good story. And it's just like, wow, that's a real raw thing to say about somebody, right? Like, that's down to the bone. But man, it's still very endearing, I still watch this movie totally enamored by this Matt Farley character. And it's really painfully relatable. I go into this at some depth in my Letterboxd review. You can read that. I don't need to summarize it at length here. But it's like, I don't know. I do a lot of this sort of stuff too. I do a lot of like weird artistic projects just because. I never had an idea as genius as recording name poop songs to make money. But I do a lot of similarly strangely devoted, nonsensical things for years and years and years. Like making these videos, not because I want to be popular, not because I think that they're important, that people need to watch them, but just because I want to, just because I feel drawn to. And it's like, I get it. I get this impulse. You just gotta make stuff. Like, you just can't help it. I don't know. It's like, I feel very seen by this movie. But I know in the same way that there's a gap between the Matt Farley character and the real Matt Farley, so too is there a gap between kind of the exaggerated person that I feel is reflected in this movie and who I truly am. But it gives me some perspective. It really does. And then, of course, what results? Well, that's the bloodbath. Since then, his life has changed quite significantly. I'd say maybe 4 or 5 months ago, the existence of the name poop songs blew up on TikTok. Suddenly everybody realized they could search their name, and a strange, odd man who sings about poo and pee will sing a song about their name and poop. And he has hit unprecedented heights of popularity. So I'm really curious about part 3, which he promised is coming. Regional Legends. Yeah. I think it could be the greatest movie of all time. Okay. That's my number 1. And that's my top 15. Long video. Thanks for sticking it out with me. I still got a lot of these I want to make about other mediums and other time spans. So please stay tuned for those. I have to go back to work tomorrow after my long holiday break, which I am dreading. So my time for working on these will probably shrink quite a bit, but I'm still going to do my best to get them all out before, it's embarrassingly late. Probably next will be the Western TV of 2024. So look forward to that one. Okay, bye bye.